What's up, gangsters? So, what's Murder-Drone? All caps, by the way, you ask? Well, it's this micro-subgenre of the slasher flick consisting of these 10 movies, all of which started with this specific Letterboxd list. But you and I, we're more visual learners, aren't we? So why not just start with a quick little Murder-Drone montage, a teaser if you will. Cue the synths. Yeah, so all of that excitement is what I'll be talking about in this two-part video series. 10 movies collectively known as Murder-Drone, originally described as movies wherein 90% of the movie is people wandering around and getting murdered, set to shitty lo-fi bedroom synths, and it's increasingly hard to pay attention, but you can't look away because you're stuck in a murder trance. I am so down with all of that. And all of it is actually very well documented in the book, or pamphlet, or however you want to call it, Murder-Drone, written by the original creator of that Letterboxd list, Peter Galvin, who was joined by Claire Cox and Nathan Walker. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The original pressing is long out of print, so I have this printed PDF version, but it will be reissued in the very near future. More on that later in the second part, probably. But basically, it's being re-released through Crucial Blast. I'll leave a link in the video description. But you guys, you know me. I'm just here to have fun with the movies. But I do want to rate each individual title on their Murder-Drone quality. So in order to get a little more clear what exactly is like the micro-subgenre that is Murder-Drone, I reached out to the original creator of the list and asked him if he could briefly describe what defines a Murder-Drone movie.
All these films give me that sensation that you get when you put on a movie from your childhood, you watched a million times, wore out the tape, the structure of the film has ceased to exist any longer. It just feels warm and nostalgic, and you return to it time and time again looking for a small part of that dopamine rush that comes from a particular vibe or a certain set piece that you like that stimulates your primate brain into doing a smile. You stop trying to follow the film, you just look at the screen and space out, wait for the next hit. And in the case of these 10 films, I got that hit the first time that I watched them, and because they're so unknowable and offer so little mental nutrition, I still get that feeling every time.
Couldn't be more clear than that. Thank you so much, Peter. If you want to follow Peter on Letterboxd, here's a link. I'll also add it to the video description. Show the guy some love. Which means it's now finally time to dive into the movies. But first, I do want to give a huge shout out to the latest Patreon members. Sean Givens, Linus Abrahamson, Keenan Elebegovic, is that right? Felix H, Thea Butt, okay. Grindhorse, Linzilla, Libby, Lee, Joe Flynn, Nick, and J.D. Bucket. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Now, that's some real gangsters. So if some of you out there like what I'm doing here with horrible reviews and would like to support me in, like being able to do so more consistently, in exchange for some cool perks, of course, please take a look over at patreon.com/horriblereviews. But now with all of that out of the way, let's finally watch and hopefully stay awake during some Murder-Drone. I'll be going through these titles alphabetically, which means we're going to start with Bloodstream. And yeah, I do not own a physical copy of it, but I'll get to that in a second. So yeah, Bloodstream. Arguably the magnum opus of independent British filmmaker Michael J. Murphy. He said confidently, as if any of you out there have the slightest idea who that is. I mean, some of you might. I certainly didn't. Until Powerhouse Films pulled the impressive and admittedly quite daring baller move of releasing his entire surviving filmography in this fancy 10-disc Blu-ray box set. Still, £75 is quite a steep price to justify a blind buy of a collection including titles such as Scare, with a K, and Almost a Movie, so unfortunately I am working with a shitty VHS transfer here. But hey, better than nothing, so let's get our murder drone on. We follow filmmaker Michael J. Murphy, or Alistair Bailey, who's showing his latest horror movie, Bloodstream. It is actually Bloodstream. To this sketchy film distributor, who's all like, nah bruh, kicks him out, and then basically screws him over by still releasing the movie, but keeping all the profits to himself. Unbeknownst to Alistair, I guess, who spends most of the movie stuck in his living room watching a bunch of horror movies from every conceivable subgenre, which makes up for most of the movie's running time. And these clips like these movies, they're kinda cool, but also, what is happening here exactly? Well, in the meantime, that sketchy distributor's assistant comes up with a plan, I guess, to take revenge, which he then presents to Alistair.
But I do love you.
What? When did that happen? Basically, they're gonna shoot a new horror movie, but this time, the killings will be real. And the victims include the distributor's daughter, his wife, and a dog? What kind of psycho behavior is that? And then he shows the distributor how he killed his family? That's f***ed up, G. Anyway, pretty elaborate plot for a murder drone flick, but also pretty fun. It's just, this is Murder-Drone after all, and it gets very repetitive with Alistair just watching a bunch of movies, working on the plan, watching some more movies. It's pretty sleepy stuff, and the VHS transfer does not help. It looks and sounds terrible. Whites are blown out, I couldn't understand half the plan they were hatching.
It's alright, I'll get them. I know you haven't got it in me. Not yet, anyway.
What? I do love how the ending is basically cut off here in this transfer.
Just wait till I get out of here.
What? What's he gonna do? Yeah, I am actually quite curious as to how the Powerhouse film transfer looks like. The story behind the movie is actually rather interesting unto itself. As you've probably gathered, it's a rather personal movie, as all of this actually happened to the director Michael J. Murphy himself. The getting screwed over by a distributor part, not so much the killing of a distributor's family and dog, I hope. But then in a rather unfortunate, ironic kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, the actual Bloodstream also got bootlegged, or so I've understood. Until that monster of a Blu-ray box set got released by Powerhouse Films, that is. So all is good in the end. So let's rate this movie's Murder-Drone qualities, which I've divided in three, let's say, characteristics. How stripped down to its most basic components is the story, how droney is the soundtrack, and how much does this movie put you in this trance-like, fever dreamish, struggling to stay awake state while watching. For each of these characteristics, every movie will get a unique rating between 1 and 10. It's not a perfect system, but, in the vein of Murder-Drone, let's not aim for perfect. So, stripped down premise, 5. Could be better, could be worse. Droney sins or score, let's say a 6. Again, kind of average, but not bad. Trend state sleepiness, 4. Yeah, stuff is about to get a lot sleepier. Okay, and I'll be doing that for every movie so that in the end we can see which of them, according to me, is the most Murder-Drone, whatever that's worth. So yeah, next up, Day of the Reaper. And yeah, now stuff is gonna get real Murder-Drone-y. I mean, they all are by design. I mean, I didn't make the rules, I didn't make this list. But this is what I feel is that, you know, that real Murder-Drone. So let's take a look at that. Made by do-it-yourself Floridian cult filmmaker Tim Ritter while still in his teens, with a Super 8 camera, a couple of friends, and a few $100 he supposedly saved up while washing dishes, Day of the Reaper is just the most wholesome thing. It's about this kid. Look, I don't think they're, like, the characters, I don't think they're supposed to be this young.
I'd like to put you in one of the rooms in that hotel I purchased not too long ago.
You didn't purchase no hotel. You're a child. But I get it. I mean, what adult is gonna make a horror movie with some 16, 17-year-old kid? So, let's say this woman. A year ago, all her friends were killed by this crazy cannibalistic murderer, and now he's on the loose again. I don't know. It also doesn't really matter. This is that slasher stripped down to its most basic components we come to expect from our Murder-Drone movies. We get to see in flashbacks how all of her friends got killed, and it's just, well, it's like this. Obviously, this is a total mess, but therein lies its charm, especially taking in consideration that this was made by a bunch of teenagers. If it isn't for the obvious fact that so many shots start directly after Ritter probably proudly yelled action, it seems like when our protagonist gets into a truck, only to cut to a shot where she's clearly sitting in the back seat because she probably wasn't even old enough to drive herself. Also, this movie was completely shot without sound, which helps tremendously with this fever dreamish atmosphere. There's barely any ambient sound in any given scene, you know, like background sound that comes from the actual environment, which gives the soundtrack a great opportunity to shine, and shine it does. Probably my favorite Murder-Drone soundtrack. The constant droning synths are just mwah. So good. Give me some more. It even comes with this pretty badass theme. I sincerely love this. Shooting on silent Super 8 does however also mean that all dialogue had to be ADR'd, and this is probably the worst dubbing you'll ever see, or hear. I mean, it barely counts as dubbing. It's at times more close to, say, a voiceover dialogue.
Well, I work at the Fireside Inn. I make out checks and such at the front office. I'm off on Fridays, though. My day off.
Yeah. Besides the occasionally surprisingly well-looking shot, this is a total technical show. These special effects aren't great, but hey, at least we have some gore. And a crazy final showdown, which is two guys kinda goofing around in a field of grass. So, yeah, this is bottom-of-the-barrel filmmaking, and it drags and it's boring, but in that very specific Murder-Drone way. It puts you in this trance-like state where you're struggling so hard to stay awake, but you try, you're persistent, even though deeply down you know there's no real worthy reward waiting for you at the finish line for doing so. Still, I honestly think this is a pretty fun little movie. Again, you basically can't judge this movie without taking in consideration the fact that it was made by a bunch of teenagers. It might not be good, I mean, it isn't, but they did make an accidental Murder-Drone masterpiece. Let's rate this fuck. Stripped down premise, boom, 8. Drony Sins score? That's gotta be a 10 out of 10 for me. And trance state sleepiness? Let's go for a 6 here. Nice. So, next up, our first out of 3 stops in France for a bit of a fan favorite, Devil's Story. Definitely among the most popular out of all the Murder-Drone titles, and perhaps this fancy Vinegar Syndrome released from like 3 years ago already might have contributed to that. Well, let's take a look. And would you look at that? This actually looks good. Yeah, it's the only Murder-Drone production that's shot on 35mm by a relatively established filmmaker, Benoit Lunois. Is that right? Sure, virtually no one has seen any of his other work, but hey, at least he made Devil's Story, and I couldn't be more grateful. Because, honestly, Devil's Story has it all. We get a creepy mansion, there's a deformed... What is this? He's wearing a Nazi outfit, and he grunts a lot. But he also kills and lives with his mother, I guess? But the daughter is dead, but looks exactly like the woman in this couple that arrives at the aforementioned creepy mansion, who, at some point during a rainy night, decides to explore outside in her nightgown. Well, and a raincoat. But there's more. There's animals. We get a black cat. Woo, and a horse. Oh my goodness, the horse. Yeah, we'll get to the horse in a bit. And then there's lore and backstory and stock footage and a miniature boat and oh my god, is that a mummy? Really, the only thing this movie seems to not have is the back part of this sarcophagus. And how all of this connects doesn't really matter. Also because I honestly have no idea how it does, but I'm all in it for the ride. See, even though I started this review by commenting on how good this movie looks, don't let that fool you into thinking that this is a movie at all. Like, sure, it looks like one, and it has most of the components that would make up a movie, but this is just such a total fever dream, and I love it. Remember the horse? For some reason, the owner of the mansion is convinced it's responsible for all the evil goings-on and tries to kill it, which takes up a surprisingly big chunk of the movie. I've actually timed it. The horse has a total on-screen presence of 7.5 minutes, which is 10% of the movie's total running time. And close to 4.5 minutes of this is the old man trying to shoot and kill this seemingly indestructible horse. It's as mind-blowing as it is mind-numbing. But again, I love it. The fact that the horse and the man seem to be in totally different locations, the lighting and the foggy field, it's, again, such a fever dream. In the end, there's no real purpose in trying to make sense of the story, especially not with the curveball twist ending, which I can't even begin to imagine what they were implying with that. It really is all about the journey, not the destination with this one. Just enjoy the horse, the mummy, the yellow raincoat, the nonsensical nature of it all. Try to stay awake during all of it and just have a good time. Yeah, honestly, this is a fun one. So, let's rate it. Stripped down premise? Well, I am afraid I have to go with a 3 here because there is a lot going on. Drony Sins score 5, and trance state sleepiness, that's a solid 8. Good stuff. And let's stay in France for a little bit and let's amp up the Murder-Drone levels to a near maximum with Folies Meurtrieres. Is that right? This one doesn't have an English title, but I guess it would translate to something like, well, that doesn't sound right. Anyway, let's just dive right in. So, by now you should know that when it comes to Murder-Drone, the plot isn't of the highest priority. Guess what the premise is here? You can easily sum it up in 3 words. Person kills women. That's literally the movie. Murderer stalks woman and kills her. Murderer stalks another woman and kills her. Do you want me to repeat this 3 more times? Because that's literally the whole movie. Okay, granted. There's a little twist towards the end which gives the murders a little more context, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the first 85% of this movie is just a murderer stalking and killing women. And you know what? I kinda love it. This is peak Murderdrone. It's so hazy, total fever dream. And sorry for using the term fever dream so much, but I don't know, it just perfectly encapsulates what these movies make me feel. There's virtually no dialogue. Like Day of the Reaper, there's barely any ambient sound. There's just, well, even though not all of the soundtrack is as droney, like synthy as Day of the Reaper, it does come with just absolute bangers like... It's, oh man, and this? Oh, man, I love this so much. It's like lo-fi slasher ASMR. This really isn't a movie to be watched, but more so to experience, to kinda just let it happen to you. The endless running around, the nothingness. Does that make sense? It's the kind of, like, you should zone out to this movie. It really only enhances the experience. What else? Well, I love the analog feel of this. The Super 8 film grain and damage, the flickering of the frame, the jarring editing. I love how at times the audio sounds like it briefly slows down. You know, like when you slightly press down on a vinyl record. Digital could never recreate this specific atmosphere. As a slasher, this is actually pretty gory, especially for like a no-budget production, and this definitely helps you wake up a bit after zoning out during the parts leading up to the murders. And did I mention that this is only 48 minutes long? Honestly, kind of the perfect running time for this kind of experience. 90 minutes would be an absolute overkill, as even at half feature length time, it kinda outstays its welcome. Again, like with Day of the Reaper, objectively, this is obviously a terribly made movie. But they did do something here. You know, like, they did create something, a certain vibe, core, Murderdrone. Because I'm pretty damn sure they weren't necessarily going for this specific result. They were most likely probably just trying to make a legit movie. But I couldn't be more happy with the results. To the ratings, stripped down premise, 10 out of 10. We got a real winner here. Droney sins and score, pretty good. Let's say a 7. And trend state sleepiness, even though it is by far the shortest, still absolute 10 out of 10. Yeah, we definitely got a bit of a winner on our hands with this one. When it comes to Murderdrone, that is. Let's see how the next one does. Because we're going back to the good old United States of America, to Long Island specifically, for the ingeniously titled Long Island Cannibal Massacre. I mean, how can you go wrong with something like this? Well, for starters, to accurately describe the plot, it would take too long, I feel, especially compared to our previous movie, and that just doesn't feel very Murderdrone-y. But, essentially, I guess you could say some guys are killing people. And to be fair, look at this. It looks, let's say, beautiful, considering we're still in the nether realms of Murderdrone. Comparable to Day of the Reaper, Long Island Cannibal Massacre was shot on Super 8 for at most a couple $100 by a teenage filmmaker, Nathan Schiff. Gotta love these kids going out and just making a movie. I tried to make a scary movie spoof, that's right, a spoof of a spoof, when I was like 13, 14, but I do not see that getting a physical release anytime soon. But this at least looks like a movie, and it seemingly has all the hallmarks of a proper Murderdrone entry. I love the film grain, the cheap gore and special effects. Honestly, this one is pretty gory and out there. Nice. Gotta love the Long Island accent.
And what are you getting so uppity with me for?
It's just, I can't believe I'm complaining about this in a MURDERDRONE video, but it's a bit boring. Hear me out though. It's not bad enough to really be fun, which is actually a huge compliment. Like, they somewhat made a legit movie. This seems very purposely written, shot, and edited, which is very admirable. But it's also relatively dialogue heavy. I just kind of miss that fever dreamish quality. The music definitely doesn't help here. I wish it was more droney, but it mostly sounds like this. It feels very stock library, quite misplaced. The DVD liner notes explain that Schiff's movies, as they are now available on home media, have been re-released with new scores, but I feel like it just doesn't really work. It feels too big for this kind of movie, if that makes sense. But then it does come with dream sequences like this, where everything, including the music, seems to come together to create some wonderful MURDERDRONE aesthetics. And they do go all out for the ending, which is unironically pretty cool. And it just goes on, and they even end things on a bit of a dreamy note. I love that. But ultimately, it is a bit of a mixed bag for me. With some trimming of the dialogue and a running time closer to something like Folies Meurtrieres, this could have been quite something. But I also don't want to sit here and complain about a movie that some teenager made some 45 years ago. I mean, what was I doing with my life at that age, besides smoking weed and hanging out at the skate park and trying to rap? So, yeah, that's Long Island Cannibal Massacre. And to be honest, I am actually still rather curious about Schiff's two other movies from around that time, Weasel's Rip My Flesh and They Don't Cut the Grass Anymore, both of which I've had on my watch list since forever, so maybe I should just finally check them out one of these days. But first, let's rate this one. Stripped down premise? These are gonna feel so low, but 2? Droney sins or score? 3? Well, which honestly is pretty fair, I'd say. And finally, trend state sleepiness? Another 3, I'm afraid. Like, sure, it's sleepy, just not in that specific MURDERDRONE way. Please keep in mind though that every movie for every characteristic, they get a unique rating out of 10, so, you know, some of these will have to get the lower ratings, unfortunately. Which would bring the interim score? Is that something that English people say? I don't know, I just Google translated this system to something like this. Because, yeah, we're already halfway through the movies, which means I'll be wrapping up this first part. But please join me in a week or so to take a look at the 5 remaining MURDERDRONE titles, where at the very end we can see which one will end up on top of the leaderboard. Woo! Isn't that exciting? I mean, like, is it? I have no idea if these ratings add anything to the overall, like, experience of this video, but all is good. I really hope you guys enjoyed this first part. Cheers, guys. Have a nice day.